am so excited that you're joining me here for my session with Dr. Dan Kalish. Dan is the founder of the Kalish Institute of Functional Medicine. And in this session today, he is going to be talking us through transitioning to telemedicine. In the session, you'll learn the 5 pillars of building a successful online practice, how to get started immediately with functional lab testing. This is the big one. And then finally, the surprising option if you really don't want to get on video with patients. So I hope you enjoyed this session. Let's let Dr. Dan take it away.
Hey everybody, Dr. Dan Kalish here. I'm going to talk about Telehealth Essentials and how you can build your virtual clinic. So my background is in 28 years ago, which is kind of a scary number to throw out, I was working with a man named Dr. Bill Timmons, who's a naturopath, and he was a functional medicine teacher and mentor to me. And he had a very active phone practice. He didn't see patients in person, he just worked with them on the phone. And so I spent 6 years training with Bill in functional medicine, lab interpretation, and every single patient we did a workup with was on the phone. And so when I started my practice, a few years later, it just made sense to me. Okay, this is what kind of stuff you do on the phone. And now we're in a world event where all of a sudden telehealth and telemedicine is kind of a buzzword. So I have been in full-time phone practice or telemedicine practice for the last 15 years. I stopped seeing patients more than 15 years ago. And it's a great way to run your practice, just for those of you that are interested. So today I just wanted to talk about a few tips, things that I've found over the years that have been really helpful for keeping my phone practice going or telemedicine practice going. And also I have, through the Kalish Institute, trained over 1,000 practitioners in setting up practices. So I see a lot also of a spectrum from people who are brand new to all this kind of work to people that have been doing it for a long time, a little bit burned out. And I try to just give you tips that I see that seem to be the most helpful for people that are moving over to telemedicine, whether you're going to do this full or part-time. So one thing and I divide it up into practitioners and patients and then the practice itself. So the practitioner part is you, right? Patients, obviously we'll talk about in a minute, that's your patients. And then the practice is like the business infrastructure and how the business works. But obviously we start with practitioner because without you, this whole thing doesn't really work. And it's your attitude and your enthusiasm and your kind of passion for the work that always builds the practice for sure. And I find that in all the training programs that I've led, that if we find a passionate, enthusiastic practitioner, their success rate is 110%, right? You just don't see those kind of people fail. The people that fail in this industry are people that are kind of halfway in it or aren't really sure of themselves oftentimes, let alone what they're going to do in terms of working with patients. So the simplest thing to do from a practitioner standpoint, and again, this is Dr. Timmons' practice model that I copied 25 years ago, is to put the whole basis of the practice around easy to perform lab tests. So easy to perform basic lab tests. For the adrenals, it's a salivary test kit. They spit into some tubes, they do it at home. For the microbiome, it's a simple stool test from one of the good quality companies that we can all use. They do a stool test at home, they send it into the lab. And for the immune-related nutrient evaluations, those are usually done from urine samples. Sometimes a little bit of blood work is required, but you can get a lot done here in terms of running a phone practice without having to go through the standard medical tests that would involve blood draws and people having to go to get the blood drawn. So at least for the current time, I think salivary hormones, the microbiome testing, and then organic acids tests for the immune nutrient evaluations are a really great way to go. Super straightforward, easy for people to do at home. And the way the process works is basically you have to convince the patient that they should buy these things, and talk about that in a sec. And then you want to contact the lab, have them drop ship to the lab company. The lab company drop ship to the patient, and patient does the test samples, sends it back to the lab, and then you get on the phone and start to talk to the person about what you think that they should do. And again, I've been running this exact kind of practice for about 20 years, 15 years full-time on the phone, and it's really great. It's very low overhead. You have a laptop and you have your home office and telephone, and you don't have to make this complicated or make it too fancy. You don't need a lot of software to make all this work, and you certainly don't need to stress out about it. I don't know, when I'm doing all these telemedicine trainings now, and people are really stressed about it when it's like, okay, why are you so stressed? And just relax a little bit. It's like a phone, like an iPhone. I can do Skype or a regular call, laptop. That's about it, you know? And I think part of it, because we all get stressed when things are new. And I think the reason why I was never stressed on the phone was because I just thought everyone did this because Dr. Timmons trained me to do it this way. But it's really easy. You can still connect with people. You can still have really great patient outcomes. And, kind of I'm a testament to the fact that that's, reality based. And you can make really, really good money doing this too, because the overhead is absolutely ridiculously low. So I think getting the patients to do the labs is step number one, and that is usually happening through you talking to the patient, getting a sense of what their history is like, and then explaining to them why these labs are really important. So in the current moment, we're thinking about immune health. Everyone is. So when I think about why would I want to do a cortisol test for my adrenal glands when I'm worried about my immune system? Well, frontline immunity, last time I checked, is mucosal immunity. And the way we prevent viruses and bacteria and parasites, for that matter, from getting into our bodies is by having a really strong mucosal immune system. And that is regulated by secretory IgA, and that is controlled by cortisol. So if your cortisol levels are not being regulated well, your first line immune defense, your mucosal immunity is weak, and there's decades of research and thousands of studies, probably tens of thousands, that'll show that that's going to make you susceptible to picking up an infection. And so we want to prevent infections in the first place. One of the standard ways to do that is to test and correct the stress response by correcting adrenal hormone output and strengthening your mucosal immunity. Boom. You do that kind of explanation in 3 to 5 minutes. People are going to want to order the test. And then for the microbiome, it's the same basic explanation, right? 60+% of our immune system is in and around the digestive tract, and the healthy or good bacteria, the commensal bacteria that make up the microbiome, actually regulate and control the human immune system. It's really quite an amazing process. And so again, strengthening the microbiome is strengthening your immune response. And of course, immune-related nutrients are pretty obvious, right? We want to make sure we have plenty of all the things that are critical, from selenium and zinc and over to vitamin D and A and whatnot. So anyways, we can test for all of these things, and you can get a patient's immune system to max out. You can also improve fatigue. You can also improve sleep problems. You can also improve people who have weight loss resistance by doing these labs, right? So it's a lot more than just immune function. That's just kind of probably the most important thing in people's minds right now today. And then the process of getting the patients to do the labs works in a pretty simple way. If you explain it really clearly as it relates to what their concerns are, if, for example, they can't sleep, you can explain why the adrenal test is going to help with their sleep. People are going to want to do the labs. And once the labs start to roll back in, then it's relatively straightforward to interpret them, to start to design supplement programs that are going to be really impactful, where people will feel like they're less stressed, they have more energy, and things are just working better system-wide, right? So a little bit of training involved, perhaps, in getting good at pitching the labs and getting people to do them, and then designing programs. But well worth it. Once you have that up and running, it's something that you can do over and over again with patients. So a second portion of this is the patient experience and where patients are coming from, and thinking about, okay, well, I would imagine most of you are in one of two positions. You're in a brick and mortar clinic that needs to transit to telemedicine, right? Or you may have an existing telemedicine practice that you just want to expand. And I don't know what the future holds. Nobody does, right? So we should all build the best telemedicine, telehealth clinics that we possibly can right now, no matter what. I mean, it's a really great gig. Like I said, going back 2 generations in my case, even if you just don't want to be super stressed and always have to be in your brick and mortar clinic, it's really nice to have a couple days a week where you can work on the phone. And so the easiest way to get this started as quickly as possible, we found, is by promoting yourself to your existing brick and mortar patient base, and sending out a series of emails where you're communicating really clearly why you're doing this and what you're offering. And we're getting great responses. In fact, my new patient numbers, the numbers of new patients that I get coming into my clinic, has basically tripled
That's
in the
amazing.
last 6-8 weeks. Yeah. And I was really worried when this thing first happened, and we had a we had like a 50% drop off in patients that lasted 2 or 3 weeks, the bulk of March. And I was just looking at, I don't know, where am I gonna go? What am I gonna do? How am
Yeah.
I gonna pay for my kids' college? And then April was double, and now in May we're on track to be about triple our normal number of new patients. And that was not a result of my charming personality. That was a result of me talking to some marketing people and saying, what are we going to do?
Yeah.
And then that marketing person saying, well, Dan, what is everybody really worried about? How are you going to address the current concerns? And once we started to change our messaging, poof, it just happened like in an email, overnight. And thank goodness for that. It turns out there are a lot of people out there that are really stressed. They can't go to see their regular naturopath or doctor, and that really, really want to get some help for sleep, for anxiety, for immune strengthening and whatnot, right? So it's just a matter of getting the messaging right and letting people know that you're there for them, in a way that meets the times right now.
Yeah, and I had a big surprise yesterday. I went and saw my grandmom. She's 83 years old, and she was telling me all about her two telemedicine things that she had had with her doctor. And I'm so like, if Nan can do it at 84 years old, I think patients are starting to very quickly adapt to the times as well.
Isn't that funny? Yeah, like the whole world is all of a sudden doing this.
Yeah, she's got her
Wow.
iPhone and her laptop, and she's talking to her doctor online right now. It's amazing. It's beautiful.
Well, I'm going to start this marketing thing next week. It's called Dan's Mom's Immune Program,
Mhm.
because she got exposed to COVID recently, and she swears that she fought off because of the supplements I put her on. Um, yeah, isn't that funny? And she's 83, and she's like posting on Instagram. My mother is putting videos on Instagram. Go figure. Yeah, so there's no barrier to this based on age, right?
Yes, yeah.
You can get this to work. And then I think that the next step, once you kind of go through your existing patient base and you start to transit people over, well, we find out a couple of things. One of which is that people really like telemedicine, even when there's not like the threat of absolutely dropping dead because you go visit your doctor in their office and you get this highly contagious disease.
Yeah.
Even before those days, when my practice in San Diego, people are like, I don't want to have to fight traffic for 45 minutes. Of course, I'll call you on the
Right.
phone, right? I mean, I don't want to deal with parking in your parking lot, Kalish. Of course, I'll call you on the phone. So there's a lot of convenience factors to telemedicine, even in a non-life-threatening moment in history. And patients really love it. It's a very intimate connection, you'll find. It's not like this distant, weird thing because you can't see them. In fact, it's kind of the opposite. When people can't see you physically, this is why I always do my consults on the phone, not on Skype. I don't have my camera running ever with patients. When patients can't see you, it's kind of like you watch some old movie and then someone's doing psychoanalysis like Freud did. The patient's lying on the
They
couch
lie
and the
down.
psychiatrist is behind them, right? It's like that. They can't see you and they're just talking into some ethereal, spiritual void of consciousness, and you're the receptor of that, the receiving agent of that. And so I find that it leads to much more frank conversations and deeper connections with people. And they're not looking at me like, I don't know, did he wear a nice shirt today? Or, what are the chairs like in the waiting room? There's none of that kind of stuff going on. It's just a one-to-one human connection. So anyways, I'm a strong proponent of working on the phone and of not necessarily running your video all the time. So
Think it's a great point, and I think it's something that probably a lot of people who are listening to this maybe haven't thought of, that because right now it kind of feels like you have to do video, you have to do Zoom. And for patients as well, like when you're wanting to get on a call with your doctor, sometimes you're feeling really crappy, and when you feel like you have to get on a video, I know the first thing I would think is like, okay, I got to do my hair and I got to make sure I look presentable, but they could just be feeling so awful. So I think it takes away both for the practitioner and also the patient, just this level of being able to be a little bit more relaxed and a little bit more comfortable.
yeah, that's so true. I do a lot of interviews of doctors for my training program. And one of the things that you see when I interview doctors at these conferences is if I'll run the camera for a while and they don't think anyone's around, they don't know the camera's running, and they're like, oh yeah, blah, 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 and they swear a little bit and they tell these really great stories. And I'm like, okay, let's start the interview. And then they're like, get my tie straight, I'm going to get all uptight. And then they totally change personalities. And what I found over the years is that un, like unrestricted kind of free flow is way, way better for communication and for the recipient to really understand what you're saying. And when we put on our like game face, like you're talking about, and we know we're on camera, totally different kind of communication happens, and it's
Yeah.
not nearly as genuine, you know?
Yeah. Especially if you can see yourself too, because there's still a little bit of yourself that's just, you may be focusing, but there's that tiny bit that's just like, do I look okay? Am I positioned right? I look weird in this shirt. Oh man, I shouldn't have worn this shirt today. And I think it happens to
Yeah.
the best of us.
So I work on the phone, like the literal phone. And one of the things I do recommend, you just have to be careful about what you say, obviously, is patients really like it if you record the session. It's
Okay.
easy to record phone calls these days and just let them know you're recording it. You'll send them the only copy. Obviously, you're not going to like send it to the NSA or something, but you know, it's private and you're going to send them the only copy. And then they have like a nice document and they have something to refer back to that helps them process all the information. Um, so then the last step here is attracting and retaining new patients. And the best way is just by asking for referrals from your existing base of patients and from doing all the online marketing stuff that we all do, right? All the summits and public education things. And a lot of my referrals now come from my YouTube channel, which is very poorly done. You know, it's not a fancy YouTube channel, it's just a bunch of webinars that we've thrown up there. And patients love it. They listen to them, they get into the labs that I do, and they learn a lot of things, and then they realize that they don't understand enough to do it on their own, and then they call. And I would say probably 70 to 80% of my new patients have watched a fair amount of the YouTube videos we have on the Kalish Institute YouTube channel, and they're just really interested in the labs, and they think that I'm the one that's going to be able to help interpret them because I am knowledgeable or an expert in that area. Okay. Um, and then the last element here, so we have you, the practitioner, the patient outreach, and what you're going to do there, and then just the simple aspects of the actual practice. My first phone practice, when in my old house, I literally was working in this outbuilding. It was like a shack. I ran a phone cord maybe 50 yards all the way back. I had to get all these like phone cords and connect them to each other and went all the way back. And I had to have an electrical cord that ran along the fence. And I just put on a down jacket and go back there and walk around and talk on the phone. And that was it. So you don't have to have a lot of fancy EMR, EHR, EBQ, whatever stuff. If you like technology and embrace it, then go for it. If you just want to do this with a good quality website and a nice clear message on your website about how to get in touch with you, we find really great conversion. I just looked at the numbers. We're getting, pre-crisis, we were getting 80 to 90% conversion from the free consults to paid patients. Now we're getting about 50%. But then our new patient volume tripled. So I don't know what's happening, but we're getting more calls, but not quite as good a quality. But we're getting at least half the people that sign up for the free 15-minute consult to sign up as new patients. And really simple questioning that goes on during those 15 minutes is no diagnosis or really fancy interpretation of anything. We're just asking, what's going on in your life? When did the problems first start? What was going on when the things that you're worried about first started? Just real open-ended general questions to make a connection and then explain what kind of services we offer. So we keep that really simple.
Do you recommend that the services be one-off, one-to-one, or do you recommend packages? What's your opinion
I
on?
don't like packages and I don't like groups, but I know they're really popular. And I'm just so used to doing things one-on-one.
You find a lot of
Uh,
people like the one-on-one attention as well.
yeah, and yeah, yeah. And I mean, I do a lot of group education,
Mm-hmm.
right? In groups anywhere from 5 to 500 people. So I do a lot of group education, but I like the connection that can happen with the one-on-one when people can really talk about things. I mean, different things happen in groups, obviously, because people trigger each other, and there's some camaraderie that develops.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I like that, a lot of the things that people talk about to me, they've never talked about to anyone else. And if there was a crowd, they wouldn't
Yeah.
get into those issues.
Well, it's good to know if someone's just getting started in telemedicine that they don't have to feel like they have to put together these complicated packages to start off with. It can just be as simple as offering, one-to-one sessions with somebody.
Yeah, just pick an hourly rate.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think you can create packages until you've been doing this for a while you understand how the package should be created, right?
Mhm.
Um, it would be like putting together a tasting, 8-course tasting menu, but you don't even know how to cook yet. It's like, I don't know, you can really do that. It'd be hard,
Now,
and it probably wouldn't work that well. Um, I say, once you've been doing things for 6 months or a year, you have a really good feel for how the systems that you want to use are going to work. Then you could get into things like packages.
okay.
Yeah. It's also harder to sell packages. And I mean, my average patient spends probably 3, 4, 5 grand easily, but not at one time. And so
Right.
they're kind of led down this path of, it's kind of like, oh, you want the new car. And then you're like, oh, it's only $400 a month, but then you want the sunroof. Okay, now it's like $450. Now you like want leather. Now it's $499, and then you got to have the nicer, sport package. So all of a sudden you're in $600 a month into a $400 a month car
Yeah.
because you just kept getting upsold these things that you really need. And we actually do that in my practice. It works really well because they pay that new patient consult, then they have to pay for the labs. Then the labs come back, they have to pay for the supplements, and it's not exploitive in any weird way, but it just sort of, it rolls out gradually over time, and people don't feel like they're being gouged at any one moment.
Do you bundle the labs in with your price for them, or do they pay for the labs separately?
They do the lab separate, yeah, yeah, um, yeah. That seems to have worked really well. And then, back office systems, we have such simple things, right? Like we use QuickBooks Online. We do everything in Gmail, professional version of Gmail Suite. We store all of our stuff on Dropbox. We're talking about things that cost $10 a month,
Yeah, I'm like, this is a really low, when you're saying low overhead, you mean a low overhead.
I know, this is why this is
$10
my
to
line here.
$12 a month for all of these.
Low overhead means low overhead, because my original business coach was Lenny Coco, who's now retired. One of the greatest living business coaches of all time. And he, for 10 years, every week said low overhead.
Yeah.
And my idea of low overhead was, like getting a 3,000 square foot clinic and then trying to reduce the electric bill, stuff like that. Not realizing, oh, maybe you shouldn't spend $5 grand a month on rent. Maybe that's low overhead. So the one thing that I was told years ago, and I just understood this a couple weeks ago, the CPA named Mike told me, every dime you save on startup costs, on fixed costs, is worth $1.
Wow.
And I didn't understand what he meant. And it occurred to me a few weeks ago, oh, what he meant was that every dime you save up front on fixed costs and regular monthly costs and on startup costs is worth $1. And what he means by that, if you have like, let's say it's a piece of software and it's only $79 a month, right? And so you're like, it's only $70 a month. I could afford that. But then you have to do 79 times 12, Okay, so now it's really like $1,000. It's $1,000 a year for that. And then you got to figure, well, how much do I have to make to pay that? I don't know. What your overhead is overall, let's say a 50% overhead, you got to earn $2,000 to pay the grand,
Yeah.
right? And then you think about taxes and this and that and marketing expenses, all adds up. And all of a sudden you realize this $79 thing is costing you thousands of dollars, right? And so I don't know why it was so hard for me to see the math on that, but what I've done in the last 6 months that has dramatically increased my income is just cutting back my expenses.
Mm-hmm.
In radical ways, that I wouldn't have even foresaw. I mean, obviously, when this whole outbreak happened, we had to give up our office. So I was mostly attached to that $42,000 a year office. When you added up everything, I was shocked.
Yeah.
We were paying like $100 a month just for bottled water. Is that good for the environment? I don't think so. That's not even a good thing, right?
That's the first thing I did too. It was like that first week when you could really feel the direction that the coronavirus and things were going. The first thing I did was like went to the business, went to the expenses, and was like, what can I cut back on? What am I paying way too? I'm as lean as can be. So I like this low overhead. But in terms of like invest in systems, are there specific systems that you recommend for people when they're getting started off? I'm thinking specifically like mailing list providers, or another question on that is like, do you recommend people have things like autoresponder sequences that are going out to their clients? New patient onboarding.
Oh yeah, we do a ton of that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In fact, I have a little document. Oh, so you must have some psychic vibe up. See my document here?
Oh, patient life cycle, yeah.
Yeah, I didn't tell you I was going to present this, but I was going to present it, and I forgot, and you just reminded me. That's pretty good.
Oh, see, that's because I'm all about the tech and the websites and the what are you doing for email
Well,
marketing?
you psychic vibe me. So this is my patient life cycle worksheet. So, and this is just the version that we have. Obviously, every clinic is going to be a little different, but from step one, where they inquire, all the way through the whole process. So we send them the new patient paperwork and our FAQ, set up a reminder, so make sure they don't forget their appointment. And then these are the 10 steps in my clinic that are super important, right? The next step is new patient consult is completed. And shockingly, a lot of people just stall out right here, right? So we got to
Yeah.
make sure that they buy the labs, confirm that that happens. Now, what's even stranger is step 3 falls apart ridiculously often. Buying the labs, right? They've already bought the labs, but they don't do them. So you got to send out reminders for people that haven't done the labs and make sure that that gets done. And then
Is this
lab
all
consult
email
review.
or do you have people calling and following up?
Yeah, so we have I'm super low tech, right? So we have an Excel spreadsheet and it has 10 columns. And
Mhm.
the patient gets moved from column 1 to column 2. And then when they complete item number 2, they get moved to 3. So every morning my staff can go in and they look at, okay, well, who's stuck in column 4? Who's lab consult review, done their lab consult, but they didn't buy their supplements yet? Oh, it's Jane, Mary, Tom, and Steve, right? And let's get emails, phone calls to those people so they go into that reminder for number 4 sequence. And as soon as they do it, then they get pushed over to column number 5. And so,
I
but there
really
are
like
auto
the way
sequenced emails for each phase, right?
yeah, I really like the way you have this set up. And what I'm loving about this conversation, I'm sure other people who are listening are loving this too, is you're breaking it down in the way that it is so low tech and it's so easy to implement. Because I think that's such a sticking point is this feeling of there's so many tech pieces that I have to figure out. There's all these new systems. What kind of apps do I need and pieces of software? And it's nice to see that you can do these things with just a spreadsheet too. You can do them.
Yeah, I know. The thing is that when the more complex you get, I mean, we have Infusionsoft and we run some pretty complex email funnels for my doctor training program. Like if you saw the flow on that, it's pretty intense and really smart marketing people design that.
Yeah,
That shit is just,
you gotta get an
that's
expert
like,
in there.
that's also a really big purchase. People are spending 10, 15 grand on my classes, right? And so it's worth
Yeah,
building out this massive funnel. But
totally.
for a patient where you want to be a little more intimate with the connection and more responsive, um, if it gets too automated, they're gonna be able to tell.
Yeah.
But if you send out 10 emails, or if you have a sequence of 2 or 3 emails that are for the people that are stuck at stage 4, they'll have no idea that that was a canned email.
Hmm.
Because it'll be like, hey, Susie, we noticed that you ordered you did your lab consult, but you haven't got your supplements yet. I just want to make sure you could get into full script and everything's working okay. It really sounds like their specific problem.
Yeah.
Um,
And you
and
can
then,
get as sophisticated as you want to with tagging people and creating these automated sequences for customers, but it's just good to hear you share this for everybody that you can get started with a pretty basic setup here too.
yeah, and in fact, on the doctor side, where we sell doctor training programs, we've moved from a simple thing like this many, many years ago to complex email funnels and tags. So we know if you buy the Adrenal Masterclass, then these 16 emails happen. If you don't, then this happens. But with patients, I never bothered to do that because of that personal connection. And I want my office staff to look at this list every day and go, oh crap, why is that? Why have all of a sudden this starting to happen, right? And to do some problem solving around it and reach out to people. Um,
And there's
plus,
something nice because even with telemedicine, it's to still have that kind of front office connection with somebody. So you're not just speaking with your doctor, you also have, quote unquote, the receptionist or someone who's customer service who's reaching out and acting as, a buffer. And I think it kind of gives you that sort of warm feeling of just going into the office and having somebody who's reaching out and is taking care of you.
yeah, exactly. I think that's the main thing is trying to mimic that connected experience for people
Mhm.
so they don't feel disenfranchised or feel like you're some Amazon where there's no phone number they can ever reach you. That's another thing I have a real pet peeve about is that we always have to pick up the phone. Now we have limited phone hours. We're not available all day, every day at all. But for the phone hours that we are available, there's a human being there that, that actually knows who you are when you call.
Yeah, that's a really nice touch.
Yeah. And as long as you limit the number of hours, it's not that expensive to cover that. But anyways, this is one of the main financial drivers, right? It's having this kind of a flow chart.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it can start in an Excel spreadsheet. You could automate it more fully later um, if you really wanted to. Let's see, I
And
think.
what about things like you mentioned supplements? Do you
Mhm.
recommend people having like their own depository on their website? How could they get set up with something like that? Do you like you a full script? Recommend full script or
Yeah, it depends on your supplement sales volume. So like, if you're selling 10, 20, $30,000 a month worth of stuff, it starts to get to be worth it to have some kind of a deal with a supplement company where you're getting pretty substantial price discounts because your volume is really good.
okay.
And then they'll usually help you with shipping and you can use their online store or whatever. I mean, if your supplement sales monthly volume is 5 grand a month, 10 grand a month, it may not be worth going through all the hassle of doing that because there's not a lot of profit in those numbers. And so some other program like FullScript can work really well. We have access to all these different professional brands. If you're allied with one supplement company and they have everything that you need, then you can use their store, their web store. But I find for most people, they're usually using a couple of different companies, and that gets a little awkward. We did all of our own shipping. I did all my own shipping and storage and everything for 20 years. And in those years, my supplement volume was really high. It was totally worth it because we're selling 30 grand a month worth of stuff. And at that price point, that sales volume, it's worth paying somebody, $20 an hour to look after it and to actually take in all the inventory and ship it out and kind
The
of control it
boxes
yourself.
together. Yeah. So you would do
Yeah.
wholesale from supplement companies and they would come to you and then you would ship it from your
Yeah, and we even sold wholesale too. I would even buy under wholesale and resell wholesale to doctors.
oh,
So we
okay.
had a pretty big operation going for a while. I just kind of lost interest in that. There's a lot of good money in it. I made a lot of money. If you like to make money, it's not a bad thing to do.
But it's good because what you're illustrating is there's a couple different levels that people can play here. You know, one being
Yeah.
having a depository on the website, something like a full script or having a full script page. Then wholesaling and having relationships with one or few different supplement companies, all the way up to having these things, shipped to your own place and putting together boxes and shipping them out yourself if you have a person. It's all about what you're interested in doing. Some people don't want to touch that side of it at all. They're just like, what? No.
Yeah, and private label too. I mean, if you really want to
Yeah,
make
private
money,
label. No, that's a great point too.
yeah,
Coming up with your own private label supplement line too.
it's just a whole different business. If you're doing that, I mean, I probably made a couple hundred grand a year extra. But when I lost it one day when this semi truck, one of those really, really big trucks you see, you're like, wow, that's a huge truck.
Yeah.
It pulled up to my house because the office didn't have room and it unloaded like 6 pallets of supplements, 8 pallets. I mean, it was like, 100 grand worth of raw stuff. And I'm like, oh man, this is like in my garage. Are you kidding? I had this old Alpha in those days. I had to pull my Alpha out of the garage, which was tragic. And then I just was like, this is not my thing. I'm not running, you know, a
Gone are
wholesale
the days
supplement
when
thing.
you have your telephone wire snaked into
Yeah.
the shack. Now you have 8 pallets of supplements.
And I guess it's like, what's your vision for your life?
Yeah.
You want to make an extra 200 grand a year and be in the supplement industry. That's great. If you don't, maybe there's other things you can do with your time that's more important than the extra money. That's kind of the point I came to.
Yeah.
Uh, and try to, that's another thing I'm realizing now as I'm getting kind of old, where where's our real value on a planetary level that you can actually contribute to the mess that we're in now,
Right.
physical health wise and environmentally and all those kinds of things. And having a little bigger picture view of that. I don't think if I make an extra 200 grand a year on supplements, it's really going to slow down climate change or really help anything. But if I can train a couple hundred doctors in how to do functional medicine, that's going to help a lot. So trying to prioritize where we're of most value to the world at large.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. And I guess I'll just end on the idea that, hey, you can totally do this. If you want to do a telehealth practice, this is a very, very doable project. I started a free what do we call it? Transition to telemedicine class or something like
Yeah,
that.
transition to
So people can check out that too if they want more information. We have hours and hours and hours of video posted now there about how to do all this stuff. I'm happy to answer questions too.
Yeah, we'll put the link down below the video too, so people can grab that
Oh, good, thanks. Yeah,
program.
that's been super successful. We got a couple thousand doctors in there already, and
Does it have like a group component to it, like a community where they can kind of connect with other doctors as well? Or
yeah, we just started that part. So we have the live free Q&As, and been doing that for a couple months. And then we just started a Facebook group for the doctors so they can communicate with each other. That just started last week. And then I'm on the phone with them or doing a webinar with them on a regular basis to answer their questions and kind of step them through the process.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
You know what? So I think the last question that I'll leave with is, if people are getting started today, do you have a first step? What's something that people can do right away to get started in moving into telemedicine?
Well, right now, the government has suspended many of the laws that limited this, right? So you should probably call a lawyer and talk to them for 5 minutes, but you can pretty much start now just picking up the phone and calling patients and starting to do consults. And I think the first step is to perfect the ability to sell an adrenal lab. When you get to the point where you can sell an adrenal lab to 100% of your potential patients, then you're off and running, because
And
that's going to then lead to other things.
in your program, do you walk people through how to get good at that, selling adrenal labs and things like that?
Yeah, we've been talking about that. Some people have even been sending in labs. I've been coaching them on how to interpret them and stuff.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you so much. This has been a great presentation. I really appreciate having you here, and I'm sure everybody also appreciates all this information. I think for me, my main takeaway was how simple, because I'm a tech person, and I'm making websites, and so I get kind of heavy into the tech and the systems and thinking about these complicated funnels. And so when I got on this call with you today, I was kind of thinking about what would the trajectory look like? What would the strategy look like? What was he gonna tell people to do in terms of autoresponder sequences and welcome things and programs and packages? And what I love is you just simplified it down really beautifully. Took my kind of techie mind right down to basics. So I really appreciate that, and I'm sure everybody listening will appreciate that too, because it kind of alleviates the anxiety of all of the different systems that you need to get started, and all the tag pieces and all the overhead, and what you provided to us is a very simple, easy to follow system for people.
I appreciate that.
Yeah,
Glad to
I
hear it.
appreciate that. Dr. Dan, thank you so much for being with us. And yeah, if anybody has any questions, you can reach out to us. And also we'll put the link to where people can find you below the video too.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate you being here with us. I hope that in this session you learned something impactful and something powerful that's going to help transform your business. Before I leave, I just wanted to let you know that this session was sponsored by my business, Brand Better, branding, websites, funnels, and more for the wellness entrepreneur. If you want to learn more about my business, you can head over to brandbetter.online to find out more. And I also wanted to make sure to invite you to join me on Friday, the last day of the conference, July 3rd, for a half-day masterclass where I'm going to help you put this all together, the Wellness Business Accelerator, and make sure that we take all of the great concepts that you just learned in all of these amazing presentations with these great rockstar speakers and make a plan for your business. So it's going to be live and interactive. check out your email to make sure what time it is on Friday, but it is going to be a live half-day masterclass. So I hope that you join me. I'd love to see you there. We're going to get some really good work done and make sure that we take all of these concepts and they're not just these, just sit and watch and take some notes and not actually employ any of these strategies. I want to make sure that these are real actionable things that you put in your business. So join me there on Friday. Go over and check out brandbetter.online to learn more about my business. And I'll see you on the next interview. Bye.